So it's our pleasure now to welcome Laura to present Grassland Habitats for Birds and Pollinators. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank everyone for joining me tonight. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about grassland birds and pollinators and our program Ag Allies, our conservation partnership that we have going. And first, I wanted to kind of set the stage as to why this conservation work is important. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but the North American Bird Conservation Initiative is a group of folks who have been doing reports on the health of the birds across the United States and Canada since 2009. And most of those numbers are fairly grim. We know that we are have nearly a third of our nation's bird species that are in trouble, and that extinction is a real possibility for many of these species. And that we have lost nearly 3 billion birds since 1970, which is a little bit hard to even wrap your head around. So a lot of the news coming out of the state of the birds is pretty depressing. And we know that even species that have been considered common in our own lifetimes can be at risk of being lost in the coming years. So we've learned from what's come before us, and hopefully we can take the one bright conclusion of the State of the Birds reports, which is that conservation works, and that we as public citizens, as well as other governmental groups and folks, can make a difference if we band together to try to reduce some of these declines. So focusing in on specifically on grasslands from the State of the Birds, we know that both the habitat and the birds are disappearing fast. So Maine's grasslands, like across and I'm sure in New York as well, our grasslands are habitat for many important bird species, and conservation of these species really depends on us protecting and maintaining grassland areas within our states. So looking specifically at some of the birds of our grasslands, I'm not going to cover all of them. I'll cover some of the ones that we run into very frequently in our work in our program. Of course, our sort of poster child for our program are the bobolinks. Hopefully all of you have seen bobolinks. The males are particularly handsome in their reverse tuxedo, is what that's called. Because they have the white in the back and the black in the front, and they're slipping yellow yarmulke that's always easy to see from quite a distance. The females are gorgeous too, just in a more muted way. And as many of you may well know, bobolinks are amazing migrants. They arrive here in the Northeast from their winter homes all the way in South America. And they travel the longest migration of one of the longest migrations of any songbird. And that they have cool tools like iron oxide in their nasal cavity to help them orient so that they can do all of this migrating. So the nestlings are tended by both the male and female, and the nestlings are fed exclusively insects. And adults also eat a wide variety of weed seeds, hence the name of our program, Ag Allies. They're doing good stuff for farmers, unless you're a rice farmer, which we'll talk about in just a second. But they arrive in central Maine, and I'm assuming New York is on a pretty similar time frame. Here they arrive in the first couple weeks in May, and then their nests they start building nests by the end of May and into early June, and then their babies mature into early July. And one really cool thing, another really cool thing I should say about Savannah sparrows both and bobolinks is they have fairly strong site fidelity. So this is a great way to help people connect with, especially, farmers who have these birds in their fields. It's a great way to help them connect with these birds because the bobolinks that they have this year are likely going to return another year if they're successful. And so that's pretty great for working with folks. Like most songbirds, they had a pretty checkered past in terms of being plagued by lots of bad human interaction. Even up into the 1990s, they were subjected to heavy slaughter during their migration through the southern U.S. Because their nickname is rice bird, and they feed heavily on rice crops, and so they are considered a pest where rice crops are grown. So how do you know if you have bobolinks? They're very, again, the male is so easy to identify, and they love to sing from high perches, which makes it really nice and easy so we can tell where they're there. And even if we might as well enjoy their sound. Sound like a musical R2-D2. So some of the other birds that we encounter when we're doing this work, we have lots of savanna sparrows. I'm assuming that you have quite a good population, hopefully, out there as well. They're another nesting bird of the grasslands. We have far too few meadowlarks in our fields, but we do have some. They are probably the iconic bird of American farmlands, but they are certainly scarce on the ground up here in Maine, and I'm assuming out your way that is similar. And I put this picture in here because I think it's so cool that, mom's job is to blend in with the grass, and the babies are meant to blend in with the grass. And so clearly this coloring is we're blending in with the grass coloring. This on the left is a meadowlark chick, and on the right is a bobolink chick. And it's amazing to me how close their coloring is. The meadowlark is just bigger and pointier. So that's pretty cool. And we have, in addition to kestrels, which Anne already mentioned, we do have nesting harriers in and around some of our fields. They tend to be fields that have wetland complexes around. But it's pretty exciting when we know we have a couple of fields in our program where we have nesting harriers. And American bitterns, Anne mentioned that I work for Avian Haven Wild Bird Rehabilitation Center, and I had no idea that they ever nest. I mean, they're a water bird, basically, but we would get them in at Avian Haven every year because someone mowed their nests. And in fact, they do nest in upland fields, again, associated usually with wetland complexes. But it was just earlier this past year, we were laying out an unmowed block for grassland birds, and I used a flushing stick. We were working on laying this block out and nearly had a heart attack when a female bittern flushed off the nest, and there was her nest of 5 beautiful eggs. So we were able to save their nest as well. So we do see them on occasion. So grassland bird populations, unfortunately, are continuing a steady and precipitous decline due to a host of factors: development, field reversion to forest, and changing ag practices. So why are our grassland birds in trouble? They need undisturbed fields and meadows for nesting and raising their young. This is a very young nest of bobolinks here. Their nests are built right on the ground, and of course, this makes them incredibly vulnerable. In the Northeast, we've had land clearing going on in previous centuries, and that created a lot of habitat for these grassland nesting birds. And since then, our ag acreage has been declining, and we've been losing habitat for grassland birds. And then more recently, our increased farming intensity across the Northeast and really across the country has been another significant factor in declining grassland bird populations. So hayfields up in our part of the world were traditionally not harvested, used to be until mid-July, which made it pretty ideal dovetail for nesting birds, and then the hay was cut. And of course, the harvesting methods were more compatible with nesting birds back along as well. But today, we know that for farmers that need good quality forage for their livestock, that harvesting earlier is better, and oftentimes fields are cut once and sometimes even twice during the nesting time frame. And that delaying this harvest reduces the quality of the forage, especially for folks who are trying to feed dairy cows and make milk. But mowing before these nestlings can fly obviously results in total nest failure. So in our neck of the woods, fields that are cut in June, which is most of them, prevent successful rearing of chicks. So, and again, looking back to the state of the birds, the bobolink has been on the list of tipping point species, and which are species that are most in need of our conservation help for quite a number of years. In Maine, I had no pictures of grasshopper sparrows. I still have never seen one. They're mostly in the southern part of Maine. But they are state endangered, and here in Maine, our eastern meadowlark is a priority 2 species for our inland fish and wildlife. So in addition to all of that they're already dealing with, climate change and solar development are pretty much the 2 newest threats to grassland birds in recent years. Climate change is causing all kinds of issues. It can change the insect life cycles and all of that sort of thing, which the birds rely on. And we are seeing, I'm assuming you are too, that hayfields are ready earlier to be cut. And we were already in conflict, but now the farmers are trying to get out earlier and they can get more cuts, and so it's causing more friction between nesting habitat and farming needs. And we are also seeing across the state some really great habitat fields that have that are now supporting solar panels, and generally speaking, grassland habitat and solar panels, though I'm all for green energy, that they don't mix very well together. So we know through Dr. Noah Perlett, who's been doing research on grassland birds in the Champlain Valley in Vermont for over 25 years now. We know that specifically in Maine, we're losing our bobolinks at a rate of greater than 3% a year. So Ag Allies was started back in 2016, and we work with land managers to try to increase the nesting success of grassland birds here in Maine. And the idea is that we are working hard with farmers who are interested to help them incorporate some habitat into working agrilands. So, and we want to support our local farms through the use of incentive payment, and we provide technical assistance and education. And it's all about balancing the needs of the farmers and the birds, and helping, again, interested farmers include some grassland bird friendly practices within their management. And we have, we would be nothing without our partners. We work with the Maine Inland Fish and Wildlife. In fact, they loan us 3 biologists the last couple of years to help us do our field work. Cornell Lab of Ornithology is another incredible partner that they've been supporting and growing our work with us since we started. And then we work again with a host of really great partners who are helping us increase our impact out on the land. So key to this program is our relationship with landowners and our farmers and land trusts. It's certainly not a one-size-fits-all program, and our whole point is to try to figure out how it works with different people's management and to find ways to make that work for everyone. And our connections with our farmers, we spend a lot of time working very closely with our farmers to make sure that we're finding tools that work for everyone. So our process of participation is we have interested landowners approach us, and then in the spring when the bobolinks arrive, we set up our site visits for the season, and we assess the habitat and what we have for nesting on fields, and then we work with the farmers on understanding their management needs and goals and help them implement best management practices that work for them. And we utilize incentive payments as needed, understanding that this is one more thing that farmers need to try to balance with everything else they have to balance. And we mentioned pollinators at the very beginning. We use the birds are a great way to connect people with the land. I had one of the landowners that we were working with who said, these birds are the sound of my childhood. And when I was younger, this was kind of the sound of summer. And so this is a great way to connect people to these grassland habitats, which provide food and cover and such an important habitat for a variety of species. Certainly it's important for our pollinators, which are also in trouble and need all of the help that we can give them, and as well as other critters. And working with people to like this lower picture, we are all sort of, I think, geared towards looking at neatly cut lawns as being the standard of what we want to see when we're looking out our window, but hoping to get more people to realize that, this diversity out here is beautiful in its own way. And so in addition to working with farmers, we also work with just landowners who, even if they don't have enough space for maybe nesting grassland birds, but have small meadows and fields that they can leave, it's an incredible habitat. And you can read the quote here, but we have landowners who are just amazed at the diversity that they see when they leave some of these spaces for pollinators and for a variety of different birds. So when we're working with farmers, we're looking to find best practices for habitat conservation. And again, I said not one size fits all. It really is about finding out what works for each individual land manager. This is one of our rock stars of our program. David Krebs runs a organic dairy farm up in Starks, Maine, and he's been working with us pretty much since the beginning. And again, when we first started, people said, oh, it's going to be really hard for dairy farmers. They're not going to want to work with you. But David's been great in terms of, I've learned so much from him in terms of how to figure out ways to make it work on a dairy farm. And we now have quite a few dairy folks in our program. So some of our management practices, certainly for fields that aren't needed for livestock forage, waiting to cut until after August 1st or later is best for the birds, for sure, especially if there might be late nesters and that sort of thing. On our forage fields here in Maine, we usually ask our farmers to delay until around July 15th on the entire field when we can get that. Generally speaking, we have young that are flighted by that point, so it's a safe time to mow. We do a lot of unmowed blocks, which is where we have a field that maybe the farmer can't leave the whole field because they need to harvest some of it. And then we look for places where there's the greatest nesting concentration and set up a block that they will delay on while they will cut the rest of it around it. Blocks should be in the field centers. Grassland birds are going to be nesting towards the center of the field because the forest edges represent predation pressure. And so, of course, blocks we try to make as large and compact as possible, and where we can to leave them in the same places year after year. So this is a couple of photos of the University of Maine, their Witter Dairy Farm. They have been working with us and set out an unmowed block for the last few years in a very productive grassland bird habitat. We also work with folks who are grazing animals. So they're with them, we tend to look for to find ways to do fallow, generally central paddocks that can be grazed after the nesting season. In the case of these sheep right here, we have a big field, and the farmer basically does kind of a circular rotation around the outside in the beginning of the season, and then usually by the time he's ready to move in towards the center, the birds are flighted, and so that works out really well that he starts in the outside edges. So non-rotational grazing is a little bit harder to work with, but we do work with some folks on that as well. And then recently we've had some community folks who were interested in trying to increase grassland habitat in maybe areas where, again, we work a lot with farmers, but the town of Surrey, which is on the coast here in Maine, we were approached by them, and they had us do a presentation, and then came up to us after the presentation and said, you know, we don't have a lot of farming around here, but we have a lot of people who have sort of adjacent 4-acre fields, 5-acre fields that they just cut to keep open, but they're cutting them before the birds are done. So in the case of these folks here in Surrey, they basically started just a town-wide education project and got this big group of landowners to hold off on bush hogging their fields until the birds were done. And it's made a tremendous difference. And they, put up flyers like this one that you see here all over town, and got, they got everybody involved. It was great. So we work a lot also with Maine's land trusts, and a lot of times with them, it's helping them make some grassland bird friendly changes in possibly their leases and policies, as well as helping them with sometimes with field refurbishment. And again, we're looking as much as possible with everyone, but particularly with the land trust for sustainable changes that are hopefully going to benefit for the birds for years to come. And our lead land trust is the Georges River Land Trust, and they've connected us with a lot of their conservation easement owners that we've been working with as well. And I mentioned field refurbishment. This is another service that we offer when folks are cutting their fields later. Sometimes we end up with some invasive species we don't want, or the fields might start to get a little bit overgrown, or they may be kind of put last on the list in terms of fertilization and lime and that sort of thing. So another part of our program is we offer soil testing, and we have some funding to help some of the land trusts and some of our landowners do field improvement, because it's great for the birds to keep those fields in good condition. Generally speaking, if it's good for livestock forage, it's going to be good for the birds. So we help a lot of folks toward that aim as well. We did a big project with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife at one of our land trusts here in Central Maine. We don't usually go to this extent, but we did forest mulching and really opened up this field that used to be a great grassland bird habitat and had pretty much degenerated and grown in. So that's been a fun project. So when we're working with landowners, we're hoping to help them, especially farmers, maybe more intensively manage some of their most productive fields and find fields that maybe are at the end of their list in terms of their cut last. Those are the fields that we're looking to see if we have nesting habitat. So we're not asking to take the most productive fields out of immediate production. And then again, these lands that aren't in ag production that can be just a win for grassland birds without it being a hardship for anyone. We're also trying to help farmers find uses for late cut hay. I mentioned dairy cows. They definitely need the higher protein, higher carb hay that would be gained by an earlier cutting. But there are other livestock that actually can benefit from this later cut hay. Generally speaking, sort of many horses and other sort of pet livestock can benefit from this later cut hay. So looking at what creates a great grassland field, people are always asking about what size a field needs to be. And the answer to that is really, it's a landscape sort of thing. So if you have a field in the middle of the woods, it's going to need to be quite a bit bigger than if you are adjacent to lots of acres of farmland and there's a lot of open land around. So, but generally speaking, we're looking at probably 8 acres or bigger for grassland nesting species, but there are exceptions to this certainly. And again, a good mix of grasses and forbs, and maintained in terms of kept in good shape with lime and fertilizer. And again, the shape of the field is important. We want to have, you know, big contiguous areas of grassland instead of long skinny strips. One of the things that we work with land trusts on are field pathways as well. You know, it's, again, I guess maybe kind of human nature. You want to put a path right through the middle, but generally speaking, then you're chopping your nesting habitat up. So we've worked with a lot of land trusts to kind of do pathways along the outside edge, which allows people to walk and enjoy and really protects that center area for the birds. So the resources we provide, again, we do our spring site visits, we do our field surveys and nesting pair count. And one of the important things, I mentioned the July 15th deadline, but for our farmers, we start doing field checks to see when the birds are flighted so we can get them in as soon as possible. So once we see that there are some birds that are starting to be flighted, we are out there at the very beginning of July and checking these fields so that we can give them the go-ahead to mow maybe July 4th or 5th or something instead of having to wait until the 15th. So we try to give our farmers the best flexibility that we possibly can. And again, we provide technical assistance during the season and soil testing, and we have these cool signs, which a lot of people seem to really like. So for this year, we started in 2016, I think, with about, it was 2 fields. It was close to 50 acres. And since then, we have definitely been growing quite rapidly, and we were over 2,500 acres this year with 120 landowners that we worked together with, and protected habitat for about 600 breeding pairs of bobolinks, as well as a host of savanna sparrows and a growing number of meadowlarks and some haritors. So that's been pretty exciting to see how Maine's farmers and landowners have responded so positively to this program over the years. We also work with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They also have, and I'm sure this is true in New York, they have conservation practices that get at a delayed mowing for the birds through their these programs, their Environmental Quality Incentive Program, their Conservation Reserve Program, and their Conservation Security Program, Stewardship Program. So we are partnering with them, and we often send people their way and they send people our way and that sort of thing. But I would encourage you, if you're a landowner and you're interested in learning more about what might be available, to visit your local NRCS office. So we know that if we as a society value these wildlife, these birds that are rightful users of the land, that we need to work together with our farmers to help find a balance out on these working lands. And again, it's been really inspiring to see farmers who are making their living farming this land be willing to take on one more challenge and one more obstacle in a really difficult business, and help us get some of these beautiful birds in the air. So really think that we are making a difference, and I know we can continue to make a difference.
So if you want to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself. If you want to put a comment, encouragement, question in chat, feel free to do that now. A couple of people have raised their hand. Laura, do you want to go ahead?
Well, Laura Lecker, I mean, this is just amazing work, and I'm very interested in the issue of generalization, how, you can spread this more broadly. But I also had a specific question. We're trying to be supportive of efforts to go green in terms of energy generation, whether it's, windmills or solar panels. And you spent 7 seconds saying solar panels spread out in fields are bad for birds. And I didn't know anything about that. So, give me 7 more seconds on that one.
Fair enough. First of all, I have to say that yes, yay. We are working, to your first point, to make more connections across the Northeast, and Cornell is really helping us kind of reach out to different organizations. But I think it's time for the Northeast to have a more cohesive plan to help these birds. And so I am 100% for partnering and spreading that word and getting things happening in other places. On the solar panels, here in Maine, we have a bunch of solar developments are going in. Some are going in the woods, some are going in, and it's easy to put them in fields. But once those panels go in, especially if they go into the center of fields, which they often do, that's the end of bobolinks nesting. They're not going to nest underneath the panels. So we are losing when we put those, and there are definitely some of those solar farms that have gone into fields where there were nesting meadowlarks and nesting bobolinks, and that has been a loss definitely for habitat. Now I know in Vermont that they've really been proactive about when they take out, when they put solar panels in a field, they have a way that they're mitigating where, okay, so maybe they've taken this out of production, but they're finding a way to incentivize another farmer to leave a different field for grassland habitat. So they're trying to balance that out, which is fantastic. And, again, I am for the green energy. It's hoping that we can have the grassland bird habitat in our heads when some of these developments are going in, and we can find ways to still maintain some of our habitat.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, both Lauras, for that exchange. Can we go to David and then Arabella?
Great. Hi, David McIntyre. I'm in California, Darling Inn.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually a former sawmill board member and officer too, and still a member. But I love bobolinks. I actually studied them at Cornell as an undergrad. So I have a question. I'm curious because I did a study on this topic, but just in practice, when you're censusing grassland birds, and particularly bobolinks or others, what census technique do you find is more accurate? So, there are various techniques, right, to census birds. And full disclosure, my study was on this topic, so I'm curious what the practical answer is currently, and I'll share what the results were of our study.
I would love to know about the results of your study. And I will say that we use the Vickery method, which I'm not sure, that was developed by Peter Vickery, who was an ornithologist here in Maine. Our whole point is to be non-invasive. So we may not be using the most accurate way to do our count, because our number one goal is not getting in, to leave the habitat and not traipse through it. So that we are sacrificing some of our data, I suppose, for the conservation ethic of staying out of the fields. So, but I would love to hear what your results were.
Yeah, so, real quickly, and this is a great discussion because it also shows the evolution of ornithology and science too. So we were comparing the line transect method, Steve Emlin's line transect, against the variable circular plot method. We actually knew the exact number of bobolinks in the fields we were doing this on because the grad student was actually misnetting and banding all the birds, but he didn't tell me what the actual number is. So we actually studied both precision and accuracy. And so not surprisingly, when you think about it, I have to admit, the more invasive technique of line transect was the more accurate because grassland birds, of course, you don't see them, until they're up. So if you flush them, you get a more accurate count. Too. So, but just a quick anecdote too, just fun fact on your point about site fidelity and the amazing journey that they make every year of 12,500 miles to and from the Pampas and elsewhere in South America. This field, one of the fields we were studying in upstate New York on Oneida Lake, was studied for a few years, and some of the birds came back, to your point about site fidelity. And there was one bird, and they were painting the tails. So there was one female, yellow. Her tails were painted yellow. She nested within 5 feet of where she had nested the prior year. And you just think about, you flew to the Pampas, not only found the same state, the same area of the state, the same field, and you nest within 5 feet of where you nested the year before. It's just amazing birds that bobolinks are. So just a little fun fact.
That is incredible, really.
That's very cool. Arabella, David, thank you for those information.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Arabella, what would you like to ask or add?
So first of all, thank you so much. That was really fascinating, and I'm really passionate about preserving grasslands. So I also wanted to add that so this year I'm president of the New York State Inverters Club, and we actually supported the bobolink project. And I was really happy because like the club, it's also passionate about grasslands. So that was really nice to see. But so on to my questions. I have two. So I know that at one point New York had a program where the government provided subsidies to farmers who were delaying mowing or setting aside a portion of their land, like for grassland birds. So does Maine have such a program? And then what are some other ways to, I guess, build awareness of grass, like about the plight of grassland birds in grasslands? Like in my local community, it's, people don't care a lot, fortunately. Like we actually live, I was in dairy farm, and then the dairy farm shut down. So it was just this, I think it's like 149 acres, beautiful grassland, like 4 feet tall. And there were bobolinks, there were meadowlarks, and then they went and mowed. During nesting season, it was heartbreaking. Like we saw all the birds, they were just sitting there. Then we saw kestrels and like eagles and vultures and all those guys. They were like grabbing everything. It was really sad. So I've done numerous presentations to spread awareness about grasslands. Like I monitor, this year I actually monitored grassland breeding birds, bobolinks, meadowlarks, and kestrels. So what are some other ways?
So, wow, there's a whole bunch there. First of all, it sounds like you're doing great work, and that's wonderful. And to your point about, I know exactly what you meant when you said how heartbreaking it is to see when fields have been mowed, which is actually how we started this program back in 2016. As my husband and I came and looked at a piece of land that had a field that was mowed the day that we came to look at it. And there were parents searching for their babies among the rows of mowed hay, and I was just completely heartbroken and horrified, and then realized, oh my gosh, this is happening, in fields all over the place. And so that's what prompted me to start doing this program. And so I totally understand that. Doing the presentations that you're doing, I think it's great. And I think, if you find farmers that are interested in doing some habitat, one of the best ways that I have found in the farming community is if you get 1 or 2 farmers on board, farmers all talk with each other, and they also trust other farmers more than maybe outside people. So it's great. We have, I showed you that picture of one of our dairy farmers. He's been a great ambassador for our program. He's going out and saying, oh yeah, I did this field and this field over here, with Laura with the grassland birds. And we had one farmer who, when I'm wearing my other hat, I do nutrient management planning with farmers. So I help them figure out where to put their manure so that it's being used as a fertilizer and isn't causing pollution problems. So I was out working with a farmer during nesting season, going over his nutrient management plan, and I kept hearing bobolinks, and I said, you have bobolinks? And he said, I have what? And so I dragged him over to the field and I pointed them out, and at first he was very skeptical, but he decided to do a small plot. And by the end of that season, he said, oh, I've been telling everybody and I'm showing everybody my birds. And, so he ended up bringing in like 3 other farmers who were near to him because he got excited about it. And I think, again, one of the other things, is when you can do habitat signs, or like our folks in the community who did, posters and that kind of thing, just anything that can kind of connect with folks. And one of the things that I don't know if you have a lot of in your area, Arabella, is if you have people who are bush hogging to keep their fields open, but they're not taking the hay, they're just cutting them to keep them open. I know we in Maine, we have people who will do that in the middle of nesting season. And that should be a fairly easy conversation, just to say, oh, you have these nesting birds. If you could just wait until, the end of July to cut, that hopefully would be a pretty easy sell. And again, when you get a few people on board, they can help spread the word for you. So. And I think it's awesome, by the way, that you are working with the Bobolink Project. We partner with them as well. They do great work all over the place too. So thank you so much for what you're doing.